You know, one of the most misunderstood signs that a woman craves you, especially in silence, is when she begins to prioritize your happiness without making it obvious, without demanding acknowledgement, and certainly without expecting anything in return. At first glance, it doesn't even look like desire. It looks like kindness. Politeness, maybe? But make no mistake, when a woman quietly adjusts her actions just to make your life smoother, there's a deeper motive that most men overlook. She's not trying to impress you the way society teaches us to recognize affection, through grand romantic gestures, flirtation, or confessions. No, her craving is embedded in the subtle choices she makes around you. She brings you food, not because she had extra, but because she thought of you first. She checks in on you, not excessively, not in a clingy way, but just enough to let you know you're on her mind. These are not random acts. They're intentional, but restrained. They're expressions of affection filtered through dignity and discretion. Psychologically, what's happening here is profound. A woman who craves you in silence has entered a space of emotional investment without security. She's navigating risk without a promise. So instead of making her feelings overt, she focuses on contribution. She gives in small, precise doses, watching how you receive them. Her care becomes a kind of language, a language you won't hear unless you're paying close attention. Philosophically, it speaks to the nature of feminine restraint and emotional depth. She wants to nurture what she desires, but without violating her own sense of worth. She doesn't want to lose herself chasing you, so she chooses to love you in a way that still allows her to hold on to her pride. That's why it's quiet. That's why it's hidden. Most men make the mistake of thinking that silence means disinterest. But in reality, some of the deepest cravings wear the quietest masks. You'll know her desire not by what she says, but by how she rearranges her world to accommodate your presence in it, even when you haven't asked her to. It could be something as small as remembering the brand of coffee you like, or as deep as encouraging your goals without making it about her. It's in the emotional weight she carries for you, without ever putting it on your shoulders. And here's the irony. Because she doesn't make noise, many never realize how much they meant to someone until she's gone. Until the small favors stop, until the warmth vanishes, until the support withdraws like a tide you took for granted. So, if you sense that someone is prioritizing you quietly, loving you without labels, helping you without obligation, don't overlook it. That silence, it's not emptiness, it's sacrifice. It's self-control. It's love in its most disciplined form. One of the most fascinating signs that a woman craves you, silently, almost unknowingly, is the way she begins to mirror you. Not in a theatrical or obvious way. It's not a deliberate act. It's subconscious. It's subtle, but it's real. You'll notice it if you know what to look for. She starts using words you often say. Her sense of humor shifts toward yours. She starts liking music she never used to listen to, or suddenly seems curious about the things you're passionate about. What's happening here isn't coincidence. It's psychological alignment. In neuroscience, there's something called neural mirroring, a biological phenomenon where we reflect the emotional states, body language, and speech patterns of people we're emotionally connected to. In the context of attraction, this becomes even more pronounced. When a woman begins to mirror you, it's often not because she wants to impress you. It's because you've entered her inner world. She's tuned in, emotionally and mentally, even spiritually. And when a woman reaches that point, she naturally begins to reflect you, not because she's trying to lose herself in you, but because craving often takes the form of unconscious alignment. She doesn't just want to be around you. She wants to feel what you feel. She wants to see the world through your lens. Philosophically, this speaks to the nature of connection. Desire isn't just about physical longing, it's about resonance, and resonance creates reflection. That reflection is not about mimicry, it's about empathy. She doesn't copy you to be liked. She absorbs parts of you because in her silence, she's forming an emotional bond. Think about that for a moment. A woman craving you in silence will often become a version of herself that's in harmony with who you are. But here's the tricky part. Most men miss it. They brush it off as coincidence or assume she's just being friendly. They ignore the slow evolution in her interests, the way her laughter matches theirs more often, or how she subtly positions herself to be understood by them, seen by them. Yet these are the early signs of deep affection, a form of closeness that doesn't speak loudly but echoes deeply. Now you may ask, why wouldn't she just say it? Why doesn't she tell you how she feels? The answer is simple. Craving in silence is often born out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of losing something before it even begins. So, instead of confessing, she reflects. She lets her craving leak through imitation, hoping you'll catch on without her having to expose herself completely. So if you start seeing yourself in her words, in her habits, in the way she shows up, don't dismiss it. Don't call it a coincidence. Ask yourself why. Pay attention, because sometimes the clearest sign that a woman desires you is that she starts becoming just a little bit more like you. Another sign that a woman craves you in silence, one that's often misread or completely overlooked, is her pattern of appearing around you, then pulling back. It's almost paradoxical. She finds reasons to be in your space, to cross paths, to show up, whether physically, digitally, or socially. But once she's there, she doesn't linger. She comes close enough to be noticed, but far enough to remain safe. It's like watching someone standing at the edge of a pool, drawn to the water, but afraid to dive in. This behavior is not random. Psychologically, it's a manifestation of conflicted desire. She wants connection but fears vulnerability. She wants to be seen but not exposed. So she creates moments of proximity. She'll ask mutual friends about events she knows you'll attend. She'll comment under your posts just enough to be visible. Or maybe she'll casually show up in places she never used to frequent but now magically appears. The goal isn't confrontation. It's closeness without risk.
Philosophers have often spoken about the tension between desire and restraint. In love, that tension can be deeply complex, especially when someone feels drawn toward a person who hasn't yet made their own interest clear. That's what you're seeing when a woman oscillates between presence and distance. She's torn between craving and caution. She's testing the waters, checking whether your world has space for her in it. The mistake most men make is misreading this behavior as disinterest or inconsistency. But inconsistency in this case is often emotional self-preservation. She may be trying to protect her dignity, her reputation, or her heart. She might be waiting for a sign that you see her the way she sees you. So she sends out small signals, her presence being one of them, and waits for a response that feels safe enough for her to take the next step. And when that response doesn't come, she pulls away. Not because her feelings changed, but because her hope dimmed. You have to understand, silent craving often lives on a tightrope. It's emotionally exhausting to desire someone in secret. So when her efforts go unnoticed, when you fail to meet her halfway, she retreats. And eventually, if the pattern continues, she won't return at all. So the next time you notice a woman who seems to always be nearby, who subtly circles your world, but never quite steps into it, don't dismiss her. Don't chalk it up to coincidence or randomness. Ask yourself, is she trying to be seen without having to speak? Is she craving connection but terrified of rejection? Because that's the silent tug of war playing out inside her. You can tell a lot about a woman's hidden emotions by the way she looks at you. When a woman craves you in silence, her eyes begin to speak a language her lips aren't ready to translate. And I don't mean the typical flirty glance or the deliberate gaze meant to attract attention. No, I'm talking about the kind of look that lingers a little too long, the one that breaks away the second you catch it, but not before you feel something pass between you, something weighty, something unspoken. Psychologically, the eyes are deeply tied to our emotional processing. They don't just receive information, they also reveal it. When someone feels something intense, whether it's love, longing, or even heartbreak, it reflects in their gaze. That's why people say the eyes are windows to the soul. For a woman who's craving you in silence, her gaze becomes the safest form of confession. No words, no risk, just a moment of exposure before she retreats back into emotional safety. What's fascinating is how instinctual this is. Even when she tries to act indifferent, her eyes betray her. They light up when you walk into a room. They soften when you speak. They search your face, not for flaws, but for familiarity, for something comforting, something hers. She may not even realize she's doing it, but on a deep psychological level, her craving escapes through her expression. The eyes carry it when her voice cannot. And if you're paying attention, you'll notice something else. There's often a mix in her look, a contradiction. It's not just desire, it's fear, it's hope. It's the silent question, do you see me the way I see you? That gaze is layered with vulnerability. It's intense, not because she's trying to seduce you, but because she's already emotionally invested and unsure if she's safe to show it.
Philosophically, this reminds us of a truth about love, that the deepest forms of connection often begin in silence. Not in declarations or dramatic gestures, but in the quiet recognition of one soul seeing another. Her gaze becomes the bridge she builds from across the room, waiting to see if you'll walk across it. But the tragedy? Most men don't notice. They miss the softness in her stare. They overlook the courage it takes for someone to look at you with all that emotion, even when they're too afraid to speak. And by the time they finally realize what those glances meant, she's already learned how to hide them better, or worse. She stopped looking altogether.
Some time. So don't ignore the eyes. Don't brush past the moment when someone holds your gaze just a heartbeat too long. That might be the only way she knows how to tell you what her heart's been carrying. When a woman craves you in silence, one of the most revealing, yet easily overlooked signs is how deeply curious she becomes about your life, even while maintaining her distance. She doesn't interrogate you, she doesn't bombard you with questions, but quietly she's watching, listening, collecting the pieces of your story and holding them like fragments of a puzzle she's longing to understand. She'll remember things you forgot you said, your favorite meal, that artist you mentioned once in passing. She'll notice when your tone shifts, when your energy dips, when something feels off. But instead of stepping forward and asking directly, she asks around. She becomes a silent researcher of your emotional world, not out of obsession, but out of care, restrained by fear. This kind of curiosity isn't casual, it's intentional, and it stems from emotional investment that hasn't yet found a safe place to land. From a psychological standpoint, when we desire someone but feel unsure of how they feel in return, we often retreat into observation mode. We study them, trying to gather enough emotional evidence to feel justified in moving closer. For women, especially those wired to protect their vulnerability, this observation becomes a survival tactic. They crave connection, but they need safety first. So instead of texting you directly, she checks your social media. She watches your stories. She notices who you're around, what you're celebrating, and even what you're not saying. It's passive on the surface, but beneath that passivity is a very active emotional current. It's her way of staying connected while staying safe. Philosophically, this quiet curiosity reflects a deeper truth about human nature. We often love in ways that protect us from rejection. In her silence, she builds a map of your world, not because she wants to control it, but because she wants to understand where she might fit in. She isn't distant because she doesn't care. She's distant because she cares so deeply, she's afraid her presence might disrupt something you haven't invited her into yet. But here's what makes this dynamic so fragile. If you're not paying attention, her curiosity looks like nothing. It looks like space. It looks like absence. And if it goes unnoticed for too long, she'll withdraw completely, not because her interest faded, but because she no longer feels seen, even in her silence. So if you ever notice that someone seems to know you a little better than they should, or if you hear from a friend that she asked about you or she remembers something small but meaningful, don't dismiss it. That's not chance. That's care. That's craving held behind emotional boundaries. Another powerful but subtle sign that a woman craves you in silence is how emotionally reactive she becomes to things involving you. especially when it comes to other women. And again, she won't always express this openly. She may never voice it out loud, but it shows up in her tone, in her body language, in her energy. It shows up in how her mood shifts when you mention another woman's name. It's in the quick glances, the momentary stiffness, the sudden disinterest in a conversation she was once engaged in. Now, let's be clear, this isn't about jealousy in the immature sense. It's not about possessiveness. It's not even about competition. It's about emotional vulnerability that has no outlet. When a woman craves you silently, everything about you matters to her, even the things you believe are harmless. When you give another woman attention, even if it's casual, even if it's just in conversation, something inside her takes note, not because she wants to control you, but because she's already emotionally connected to you without any of the validation that would make that connection feel safe or reciprocated. Psychologically, this response is rooted in what's known as emotional displacement. Because she's suppressing her own desire, she doesn't know where to put those feelings, so they leak out when she perceives a threat, especially if that threat is someone who appears to hold a space in your heart that she wishes she could occupy. Her silence magnifies this. She's not going to compete openly. She's not going to confess anything. But her silence is loud when she withdraws, when her usual warmth disappears, or when she suddenly becomes busy or unavailable right after something involving you triggers that internal ache. Philosophically, this speaks to one of the deepest truths about human affection. We often suffer most where we are least acknowledged. She is emotionally invested in a bond that doesn't officially exist. There's no label, no agreement, no verbal affirmation, but the feelings are very real. And because of that, so is the pain. Her reactivity is not immaturity, it's the psychological burden of unspoken love. But this is where awareness becomes so important. Most men completely misread this. They think she's moody or worse, uninterested, when in fact, her distance is a defense mechanism. She's protecting herself from being too affected by someone she hasn't been given permission to claim. She's trying not to fall deeper into a space where she already feels emotionally overexposed. Mm. So if you ever notice that a woman you thought was just a friend seems unusually quiet when another woman enters the conversation, or if her tone shifts subtly when you talk about someone else, don't brush it off. That silence is not indifference, it's emotional restraint. It's her trying not to show how much she cares.